Now, one thing I wanted to mention earlier but didn't, so better late than never, is the layers. That's one of the beauties behind image editing software such as GIMP or Photoshop, is the ability to use layers. And I've got the dialog box over here where I can toggle back and forth between the layers that I have, the channels, and my history. So if I screw something up, I can always just go back to where it was before. Voila, mistake erased. And I've got the paths tool, which we're going to be using here later on. And when you first start off, you may not have this at all. And all you'd have to do is come over here to Windows, Dockable Dialog, and you can add this. So if I were to close this out, come over here to Windows, Recently Closed Docs, and there we go. Now then, if you don't have these, for example, by default you might just have one for layers. Hit this arrow button here and you just click on Add Tab and you just select from whatever one you want here. Maybe you want the histogram. There you go. But I don't want that, so I'm going to close that tab. So at this point I just want to use my layers, and right now I've got 3 different layers here. And that's another thing, is that you want to create a different layer for every additional element you're going to have on your infographic. For example, the drop shadow. That's the drop shadow. Here's the text and the drop shadow. You can also group these together. Let's go on up here and right click on this, new layer group, right click on this, edit layer attributes. Let's give it a name. Let's just call this title text. Okay, now then we can just take the drop shadow and dump that in there, and take the text and dump that in there. Oops, nope, it didn't go in, it just went above. That's one thing you want to make sure of, that if you're going to be adding these elements to different groups, that you drop it into that particular group, not on top of it like I just did. Now then, whenever you collapse it, you've got 2 things showing. You've got 2 layers showing. You've got the background here, and you've got this entire group, which contains everything there. And this can come in handy later whenever you have to make changes or adjustments to all these particular elements. You have to do so as a group. You can't do so individually. It doesn't allow you to select multiple items. Like for example, you can't select that and this. Like for example, in Photoshop you can hold your shift key down or your control key down and select different elements. Not so much in GIMP. Well, at least way is not that I've been able to find out. So I have to make everything into groups. And I also make sure that I title each of my layers as we go along. That just helps keep things organized. Okay, so enough of that. Let's go ahead and make our box here. Come on up here to our rectangle select tool and select that. And we want to leave enough space on either side so that we can keep those angles just right. Now I want rounded corners as demonstrated here. And what I meant by angles is, if you take this all the way out to the side, then whenever you go to tilt these guys, the corners are going to run off the sides there. So you want enough room here between the actual text box and the edge of your background so that you can make the tilt and still have the entire element showing. Okay, so let's get this out of here. And I also want rounded corners here, and we do that right here by checking this box under rounded corners. And by default you're at 5 pixels, which you can't even tell. I'm going to make this up to about, what, 50 I think. And you can do that by clicking this over or by just highlighting that. Easier said than done. And just entering the number you want, or you got the up and down arrow keys here. And that's a nice rounded corner that I'm looking for. Now then, you want to make this an actual layer, and to do that, come on down here and create new layer. And by the way, there's probably several different ways in which you can do these different things. So if you're familiar with how to use GIMP and that's not how you would create a new layer, well, just look at it like this. Now you know another way in which you can create a new layer. Make sure this is transparency and then click on OK. Then we want to fill this in with white. Come on up here to our bucket fill tool, and we want to fill it with the foreground color. and right now it's blue. We're going to go back to the defaults of black and white, then reverse that so the foreground is white. Again, make sure the bucket tool is selected. Anywhere in here, click, and it fills it. Now I just realized that I added that layer inside of our title text group. We don't want that. So we want to select this, left click, hold, and drag it above that group. Let's go ahead and collapse our group here. And now let's go ahead and name this layer by right clicking on it and then left clicking on this top item here, edit layer attributes, because I know it's kind of a little bit off the video here. And then this pops up. Give it a name, white text box 1. There we go. And that's how you can create your text box. Now you can do the same thing and not have it as square. For example, if we wanted to do this with round, let's go ahead and deselect this. So I don't know if you can see the marching ants go along there. Right now that's selected. We want to unselect that. And let's come on up here to our ellipse select tool. Select that and expand from center. And just left click, hold, and drag this on out. You can see you can make different sizes and styles. So right now that is just like we did with our rectangle up here. Let's go ahead and create a new layer and make sure that it's transparency. Okay. Our bucket fill tool, and let's say we want to go with red. I'm going to delete this because I don't want this, but just to show you. And then we click inside of here and it turns it red. Come on up here and deselect. Now we can move that. Make sure that that layer is selected. Come on up here to our move tool. That's the guy with the 4 arrows. And move this on out of the way. Better yet, I'm just going to delete it. But now you know how you can create these different elements here. Select it, hit the trash can, and it's gone. Next up, we're going to be adding images.